The parish of St Ephraim in Cambridge was founded by Metropolitan Anthony of Surosh, who will be known to many people. He was the Russian Orthodox bishop based in London, and was the bishop of the diocese from 1957 until his death in 1993. It seems that services were first held in Cambridge in about 1973, following one of Metropolitan Anthony's visits to Cambridge when he preached one of the university sermons. Services were held approximately once each month for over 20 years. It was only when my predecessor, Father John Gillians, came to Cambridge in the mid-1990s that services began to be held on a regular weekly basis. And it was from that point that the parish began to grow. Our services at the moment are held in Westcott House, which is an Anglican theological college, and we've been worshipping there for the last 11 years. When we first went to Westcott House, there were perhaps 25 or 30 people in the congregation at the Divine Liturgy on a Sunday morning. Now often on a Sunday we have 70, 80, sometimes 100 people in the church. 11 years ago there was one child under the age of 12. Now it's not unusual for me to be giving communion to 12, 15, 17 children on a Sunday morning, as well as adults. This is how the parish has grown. In the last year and a half alone, we have received 12 adults into the parish, in addition to children who've been baptized, and of these adults, 4 of them were received into the church by baptism, and 8 of them by holy chrismation. We are very much a multi-ethnic and international congregation. So in addition to Russians, we have Romanians, Greeks, Cypriots, British, Swiss, American, a man from Bangladesh. Not quite every nation under the sun, but a very wide number of nations are represented now in our parish.
What about the history of Orthodoxy and the British Isles?
It seems that there was some Greek clergy came to study in Oxford in the 17th century. There was a Greek parish in London in the 17th century which operated in a very highly restricted way by the Anglican Bishop of London, so much so that he would allow them to have no icons, and they weren't allowed to mention the saints in any of the services. So this ended up being hardly Orthodox worship at all. With regard to the Russian Orthodox Church, I suppose the presence of the Russian Orthodox Church goes back to 1716, when a chapel was attached to the Russian embassy in London, and there were services held there on a regular basis. Priests were sent from Russia, and it became virtually a parish. Of course, that chapel was closed at the time of the Russian Revolution. We have an interesting connection because the gates of the iconostasis from the embassy chapel are now still used in our cathedral in London. They still form part of the iconostasis there. After the Russian Revolution, the Russian parish, as it became rather fragmented. There were 2 groups of Russians, one which remained loyal to the Moscow Patriarchate, one which was with the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, and relations were very frosty for many years. And those 2 different Russian congregations worshipped on alternate Sundays in the same church, which was lent to them by the Church of England. The church was St Philip's in Buckingham Palace Road, which was demolished in the 1950s to form part of Victoria Coach Station. And then subsequently the Russian Patriarchal Parish began to rent the present building and then subsequently purchased it from the Church of England, which is now the Cathedral of the Dormition of the Mother of God and of All Saints in Ennismore Gardens in Knightsbridge.
So what about the connection of today's Russian Orthodox Church in the UK and Russia itself?
Following the collapse of communism in the late 1980s, early 1990s, there was a huge influx of Russians to the United Kingdom, and the number of Russians worshipping at our cathedral increased perhaps 3 or 4 times what it had been only 10 years earlier. And now you go around Britain and you will find groups of Russians almost in every town.